Jesse was I turned on the stream just to hear if you were even talking while I was gone.
I
Which
tried. I tried to go a little bit deeper into some other. I said Nordic model is one way we can address equality. I also said student loan forgiveness, and I also said um, UBI and the Nordic model of
yeah,
distributing dividends to having public entities invest in corporations and get dividends to workers, which is kind of what the Nordic model talks about.
yeah,
Um, and then after that, I was like, it was 5 minutes in, and I was like, I haven't seen. I thought you would be back on by then.
yeah.
And
I
so
was working on it.
I was like, I told everybody, I was like, we're gonna take a commercial break. Let me see if I can get Seth back on.
Yeah, maybe the people needed it. It was
Yeah,
much needed. I don't know. We'll figure. We'll see if I can edit that part out.
you
It's good
probably
practice for
can.
me because I'm not good at editing the videos yet.
You probably can. I'll edit it out. And for people who are watching us live right now, you got the unedited version. That sucks, but it's cool because it's authentic.
It's very authentic. That's our whole
Very
thing.
authentic. And but the edited version that we probably drop would have that big 8 minute break gone. So now, I was talking about the Nordic model, and we wanted to
Yeah,
dive deep into that the dividends, and you were trying to explain that is essentially
the social wealth fund.
yeah, social wealth fund. Is that? Can you explain that a little bit more about what that the Nordics do? I say
Yeah,
Nordics like it's a country, but the series of countries who
yeah.
adopt this model.
Well, Norway is the one that has the social wealth fund, and also
Yeah.
Alaska has their own version of a social wealth fund called the Alaska Permanent Fund.
So does it
Um,
have to be something where like it's under 23 degrees and below for that to work?
no, it seems no. It actually has more to do with oil reserves, and
Okay.
specifically, Norway has nationalized a lot of their natural resources like that.
Hmm.
You can't privately own the oil fields in the country because nobody can own land. It's kind of just you're either share it or you own it by imperialism and by. Or do we lose? Okay, you froze for a second. I got nervous.
Oh no, I'm here.
I'm glad. Now I have trauma.
It's got like drama
Well,
free.
I'm not necessarily. I'm not sure about nationalization. You could talk me into it, but and it doesn't. A social wealth fund doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, in using oil reserve revenue. It just happens to be the two biggest social wealth funds or most popular ones. They get
Yeah,
the revenue from oil and they invest that money
yeah,
publicly into companies, but the dividends are given by the people or given to the people instead of just
yeah,
the wealthy shareholders, the 1% of society. 10% of people own shares, and it, when it gets down to it, a majority of that 10% is 1% of those people. So we're just not seeing the profits in society. Essentially, everybody works for a wage, but at the end of the day, when a company grows, that growth goes into the shareholders' pockets. They don't share
yeah,
that growth. They'll use that money to reinvest in certain ways. They'll use that money to advertise, and then everything off the top they pocket.
yeah.
And it's like, what do you really contribute to a company? I mean,
Uh, you contribute a lot to a company.
I'm
I
saying,
mean,
what do you as a shareholder? You personally are not contributing to the money
well,
or to the company. Your money is. Your
yeah.
money is the
So
contributor, and you don't
I
need the person to be. So go ahead.
no, I would say that, for example, I had shares of Apple and I have shares of Disney, and I'm not gonna lie to you. Anything in my house, it's gonna be Disney and Apple because I
Yeah.
have shares. So I own a piece of the company, so I buy things that the company produces,
hmm
and I think that's how we contribute to companies and as shareholders.
I
I
mean, but
think that.
everybody has Disney and Apple at the same time.
Oh yeah,
You're
true.
contributing as much as any other consumer.
Yeah,
I mean, technically, you could be using your revenue to reinvest in the company in a way, but it's like
yeah,
it's a little. It's at least it's not as much of a contributor as the employees and the people, the engineers, the people that actually make. make Apple products and
No, of
design
course.
them. They don't get a
Yeah.
share of that stuff. They're hired. When you
Yeah.
talk about innovation,
Hmm.
you have a bunch of people hiring people to innovate for them, while the people that are doing the hiring get the profits of the investments or of the innovation. We have patent companies, companies that buy patents and copyrights, and they sell them to people who want to use those patents and copyrights to use artistic avenues. Essentially, we obviously know the music industry is super corrupt in the way that the artists don't get the same amount of share that they deserve from their music.
Of course. Yeah.
Everybody, every industry relies on these wealthy shareholders to because they have all the money and all the power. So it's
Yeah.
like it's an endless cycle, and we're always going to have to rely on the capitalist class unless we grow the middle class, unless we grow the working class. Because if all the wealth is in those hands, then we're always going to need that wealth to contribute to society. And
Well,
the wealth is what we need. We don't need the capitalist class. And how do we get that? We can't just take that money. We can't take all that money. We can't just like do a wealth tax, and because those people have the freedom to leave. So we need to balance redistribution with
mhm.
investment and with you know the Nordic model has low corporate tax rates because they want to encourage investment in their companies, but they also have really high tax rates so that the shareholders who are invested in those companies, they still have to pay out a lot of that money, and it redistributes amongst society. And there's a lot of ways to do it efficiently with universal programs, but
Mhm.
also there's just ways that people people don't have any choice in the costs in their life. Somebody who has a child has to have childcare.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And childcare is so unbelievably expensive in the United States of America. And countries like the Nordic countries, they have universal childcare, stuff like that, where it's paid for. So
Yeah.
even if you make less of an income, which Nordic countries overall they don't make as high of an income as the United States. But the United States, all that extra income that we are earning, we have to spend on much more costs that aren't socialized, like
Yeah.
healthcare, like childcare, like certain transportation, like all sorts of stuff like that, which the Nordic model just like, if everybody has access to childcare, then that's an entire cost we can eliminate from society. And that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense because it's why should people have to suffer for having children? That doesn't make sense.
No, it
Don't
doesn't.
you want those parents to invest in their children and be able to grow and provide a better future for future workers?
Yeah. Of
So
course. You
so
want to
there's
be
stuff like,
productive.
what was that?
You want to be productive and healthy. You know.
Yeah, and healthy. That's another great point. The United States, we talk about all the money that we don't want to invest in our workers because there's so much money is wasted for no reason in the programs that we do have because of some ideological commitment to markets and capitalism,
Yeah.
which the conservatives hate Medicare and Medicaid. Well, some of them do. They love to talk trash about how much we're wasting on these.
They'll never
Oh,
put up a
oh.
bill or try to cancel it. You know
Yeah,
that.
we need to, but it's like the way for us to reduce the prices is not free market capitalism. Okay. The
Yeah.
problem with Medicare is that we offer a blank check to pharmaceutical companies, to private healthcare or private insurance companies. And we say we're going to cover the costs for these. We're subsidizing them essentially. We're giving them the grounds to survive. We're
Yeah.
giving the private companies. It's corporatism. It's corporate subsidies, and they have all the power and control over the pharmaceutical companies because we are giving them that right to control us. And it doesn't make any sense. It's not in anybody's interests. We spend twice as much per capita as every other of the Nordic countries, European countries that are fully developed economies. They spend half as much per person on healthcare. They have healthier people. They don't have people that are not covered, like they're homeless people with mental health issues. All the people who live in the streets in San Francisco, almost all of them have mental health issues.
Yeah.
and they are not they you we have commodified healthcare and mental health care. You have to have a job and you have to do this and that in order to cure your or give yourself care for like your schizophrenia. That
Yeah.
doesn't really make any sense. It's not equal opportunities. You're born with certain diseases and handicaps that prevent you from pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. People say pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, but you know that that's like an ironic term, right? Do you know your bootstraps are connected to your boots? You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps because you're standing on the ground. You would have to be levitating in the air to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's what's ironic about that phrase.
That is a pretty deep analysis.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't just fix yourself in an unequal society, one that doesn't give you equal opportunities. You need a certain framework, a certain base level, something like universal basic income, where even even if you aren't the most contributing person of society because of pre-existing conditions or some way,
Yeah.
you are still allowed to and live and pay for your rent and get a certain amount of food. Like we're not just gonna allow you to suffer and die because you don't have a high enough market value, which is all that America cares about is the market value of the people.
Yeah. The most productive people. It's like,
Yeah,
and reality, they don't realize that productivity is a construct of your environment. It's like I can be more productive if I have the
yeah,
means to be more productive. If I
exactly.
have, if I have to work 3 jobs just to afford healthcare, guess what? I'm not productive that much because guess what? My resources are being split 3 different ways.
Yeah, and you're not getting the sleep you need. You're not getting like the rest you need outside of work.
Yeah.
Like it's a proven fact that if we cut down to 4-day work weeks, we would have just as productive of people because they have more rest and they'll be more productive at their jobs. And
Yeah.
also, that's a really important thing is people don't want to be productive in a job that they don't care about. People
Yeah.
people want to follow their passions, and we have capitalism relies on you finding a job that's profitable for yourself, not a
Hmm.
job that suits you, that you would be most efficient in. If you wanted to work at a job that doesn't pay as much as a really well-paying job in a Nordic country, it's okay, and you can pursue that because you're still going to have access to healthcare, you're still going to have access to housing, and if like you lose your job, they have good unemployment programs.
Hmm.
So you don't have to worry about I need to have a job that pays me enough to survive. Otherwise, I will be on the streets. No, they're allowed to pursue what they want to do, where they're going to be most efficient. We have a healthcare system where we want to pay doctors so much money, so people become doctors just to earn money, not because they're really care about helping people or really care about yeah, just making people healthy, which is the role of a doctor. We want
Yeah.
people to perform their tasks to what the task needs, not just I need to clock in and clock out and make my dollars, dollar bills, y'all.
And that's the society we've grown into.
Yeah.
You know,
If we offered education to every single person
free
coming,
education,
yeah,
free
free
college
education,
education.
or even like really reduced accessible education,
Yeah.
or trade schools, we give people the resources they need to advance their market value, we would have
Hmm.
a much more efficient economy. We'd have a lot less losers because right
Yeah.
now we have a lot of people who are struggling because they're in misplaced jobs and they're alienated from their families, and they have to work more hours than they would want because they are under a system where they don't have any control over their personal life. It's not a free economy
No.
because the government isn't regulating it or whatever. You want a economy where people can be free, you know. It,
Yeah.
and there's ways to do that that require certain levels of government regulation over exploitation and over coercion. There's certain ways that the government can use government to make you more free, called like positive liberties. The-
Hmm.
Obviously, we need negative liberties. The government is not allowed to take away my freedom of speech. The government's not allowed to restrict me from doing this or that, but we need positive liberties too. We need the government to provide in certain ways. In
Yeah.
market failures, they need to cover things that capitalism can't cover. So there's a balance in government, and there's a balance between socialism and capitalism, and everything in society that's going to advance requires balance.
Yeah.
It requires a very specific mixture that dogmatism and, you know, black and white thinking does not fix. And that's one of the biggest problems with the duopoly that we exist in, is we have left and right, and we have all parties left of center are one party, and all ideologies right of center are one party. So that
Yeah.
everything you don't like, it's Democrats. Everything you don't like, it's the Republicans. Instead of like a sort of synthesis of ideas to
Yeah.
create the best result.
But that was the whole point in the foundation of the country, was for that to happen, you know? But it's gotten to the point where now it's becoming like people are not even thinking at this point. People are just saying, well, I have to be a Democrat because I'm black, or I have to be a
Which,
Republican
I
because
mean, the
I'm a
Republicans
white
give you a
guy.
lot of reasons to not want to vote for them if you're a black person.
I
You
agree.
might be more conservative, but you're not going to want to vote for something that even represents your values because it's split down the middle, left or black and white thinking. You don't you It's a tribalist country.
I agree. And sorry, I apologize. I
No,
just
I was waiting for you to say something.
yeah, I was saying, yeah, Republicans, even them, they've like, if you're an old white man, then somehow you're just a Republican without even listening to the ideas. And so we've gone to this point where we become so tribal, like we were saying earlier, that you're not even listening to the ideas of these parties, or and you're just saying, well, I'm a Democrat because I fit this gender, I fit this
Yeah, certain
stereotypical
demographics.
demographic, and so I have to be this. But if
Yeah,
you listen to what the people are saying, you're probably not that. And that's where I think well, George Washington, cautioned people
yeah,
with this two-party system. He's like, look, it's okay that we have discourse amongst, ideas, but
yeah.
when the ideas become to the point where it becomes
Factioned.
factions and tribalism, and there's no idea of thought, or there's no conversations of thought, um, we die as a society. And
Hmm.
he foreshadowed that 200 years ago,
Yeah,
roughly around 200 years ago, and we're living it right now. So I 100% agree with you. I think that we need to get our politics back into the idea, so we can start operating in the gray area and
yeah.
moving away from the black and whites.
the
You know,
the whites, the
black and
dang
white, the
whites.
black and white system.
I know. I'm just a smartass. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. I think universal basic income is a new concept for a lot of people. There's stuff like the negative income tax, where, when you file your taxes at the end of the year,
Yeah,
if you don't make enough money, there's a certain standard, and you'll get paid the difference essentially. And
yeah,
and even right wing economists, if you've heard of Milton Friedman,
hmm,
advocate for a negative income tax. It's just sensible to not have people making less than a certain standard. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of right wing people would around the world, uh, right wing parties support certain welfare programs like that. But in our country, we have such an inefficient government that it's very
hmm,
sensible for Republicans to not trust government. It is sensible. We're not very efficient. The tax money doesn't go to the people. It goes to the military industrial complex. It goes to
yeah,
corporations. It goes to the ultra wealthy and powerful people. So why would you want to pay more in taxes or risk that when you're not going to get anything returned? You're already struggling to live as it is. Why pay more in taxes? So unless we have a system that gives you a return on your investment into the government and society, you're never gonna have uh, a a system where both sides can agree on anything.
100% agree. You're 100% right, and that's where we are. I think that's what we're working on. As what I would say, as the progressives, we're like, look, we have the better ideas, and we should
Yeah,
focus on that instead of you focusing on Democrat or all these marketing terms. But let's just look at what we're saying and compare it to what you want in your life, and you can see that the progressive message wins,
yeah,
and that's what I think we should focus on.
I